a group of students from Taylor's University, are honored to address you today on a topic of profound importance: child labor in India. Our aim is to bring about social awareness on the issue and the negative impacts of it. When someone mentions India, the first thing that comes to mind could be their culture, their delicious food, or Bollywood movies and songs. Or it could be their current problem with overpopulation, air pollution, or even poverty. However, not many people know that child labor is prevalent in India. So, what is child labor? Child labor is any work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, and that is harmful to physical and mental development. It extends into many different sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, mining, and even domestic services such as prostitution. The main reason for this issue in India is due to poverty, where more than a third of India's population live under the poverty line. Due to this, families with lack of job diversity, low income, and poor living conditions are forced to put their own children to work instead of educating them. At times, parents sell off their children to child traffickers to gain extra money. According to Save the Children, there were 8.3 million child laborers between the age of 5 and 14 in 2016 in India.
Background of research. India is currently experiencing rapid economic development, yet child labor still persists in marginalized communities and specific regions. Poverty is one of the primary drivers of child labor. The COVID-19 pandemic has compounded India's child labor problem. Economic insecurity, unemployment, and poverty brought on by this pandemic put many families further in financial distress, forcing children into labor simply for survival. Supply chain disruption decreased jobs opportunities for adults, which increased children's susceptibility to exploitation, while temporary school closure created obstacles for millions of students' educations, particularly those without online learning access or lacking necessary devices such as electricity, increasing risk for dropouts, early marriages, teenage pregnancies, or child labor. 2011 alone witnessed an alarming count of 10.1 million children working, showing the scale of this crisis. Recent data from the National Crime Records Bureau reaffirms this challenge with 982 documented cases under the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986.
Since child labor remains as a persistent and deeply rooted issue, it is essential to establish clear research objectives that can aid in working towards eradicating this issue. To do so, we focused on three main objectives. First is to assess the awareness. Before we can educate or advocate for the rights of children, we need to assess if people are aware of what child labor is and why it's such a prevalent and dangerous issue. In this research, we focused mainly on university students to target a specific group and have a bigger and more lasting impact. The second objective is to investigate the underlying causes. In order to eradicate an issue, we need to understand the underlying causes and consequences. We should be clear about the systems in place that are promoting child labor and what the effects of child labor are on the children suffering from it. Lastly, we aim to advocate for implementation of existing laws and policies. Both the relevant government agencies and citizens have a responsibility to ensure that the current policies are being enforced. It is our responsibility to report if we see any violations and call for new legislation to be made if the current ones are not sufficient.
For this research, we opted for an integrative approach by combining both qualitative and quantitative data through a mixed methods framework. We utilized Google Forms to conduct surveys to collect numerical data alongside in-depth
descriptive insights gathered through interviewing several university students. Additionally, we obtained information from reputable published journals on the subject matter to provide a robust foundation of reliable values and facts. By blending these diverse methodologies, we were able to gain a comprehensive understanding of the intricate aspects surrounding the delicate issue of child labor, thus facilitating a thorough analysis of our findings. Our survey was meticulously designed and administered through Google Forms, reaching out to a diverse pool of university students. The survey aimed to gather quantitative data on the level of awareness among university-level students concerning child labor, specifically focusing on the context of India. The carefully constructed questionnaire, comprising 21 questions, delved into various aspects of the participants' understanding and perceptions of child labor. A total of 71 participants representing 12 different nationalities contributed their responses, providing valuable insights into their awareness levels and individual viewpoints on the topic of child labor. As for some of the most notable results from our survey, 78.9% participants thought that India had the highest rate of child labor. This was followed by a much lower percentage of 16.9% in China and 4.2% in South Africa. When we asked our participants what they thought were the main reasons for child labor in India, 55% of our respondents believed that poverty was the main reason. This was followed by 28% of our participants thinking that culture was one of the main reasons for child labor in India. Most of our participants believe that agriculture, garment, and retail work are the main sectors that child labor contributes to in India. And 63% respondents were not aware of the Humanium's partnership with Hand in Hand in India to stop the violation of the rights of children.
Yes, I believe it's morally wrong. This is because when children start work at a very young age, it affects their physical development, mental health, and socially. So, and in nearly every case, it cuts children off from school and healthcare, restricting them from their fundamental rights. So, I think it's morally wrong, yes.
Yeah, ideally, child labor should not exist. However, due to people in family situations, some children are forced into work to help out with their family. Their parents aren't able to provide for them and their siblings, so usually older siblings are supposed to help their parents. But I think overall child labor is wrong.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Laws and regulations. In pursuance of National Child Labor Policy, the NSLP scheme was started in 1988 to rehabilitate child labor. The scheme seeks to adopt a sequential approach with focus on rehabilitation of children working in hazardous occupations and processes in the first instance. Under the scheme, after a survey of child labor engaged in hazardous occupations and processes has been conducted, children are to be withdrawn from these occupations and processes and then put into special schools in order to enable them to be mainstreamed into formal schooling system. A legislative action plan, which includes that the government has enacted Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986 to prohibit the engagement of children in certain employments and to regulate the conditions of work of children in certain other employments. Project-based action plan of action for launching of projects for the welfare of working children in areas of high concentration of child labor. Steps taken for eradication. Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986 prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 years in 18 occupations and 65 processes. The Union of India monitors the enforcement from time to time. Special drives on enforcement and awareness generation are also launched from time to time. During inspections and raids, children identified are rescued and rehabilitative measures are set forth in motion by way of repatriation in case of migrant child labor, and providing bridge education with ultimate objective of mainstreaming them into the formal system of education. Constitutional provisions. Article 21A, right to education. The state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state by law may determine. Article 24, prohibition of employment of children in factories, etc. No child below the age of 14 years shall be employed in work in any factory or mine or engaged in any other hazardous employment.
To conclude, after using various methodologies and viewing the laws that surround child labor in India, child labor in general is an inexcusable practice as it goes against the morals that values a child's dignity, childhood, and a child's happiness. After some discussions and viewing the results of our research, it was further implied that child labor would also be a major deprivation of a child's normal childhood, mental health, and also their health in general, and the practice should not exist. It was also found and highlighted in our findings and discussions that it was the lack of law in India and the poverty in India that were one of the largest factors that led to child exploitation and child labor. In order to eradicate this issue, it is much necessary for us to bring awareness to the general public about child labor. It also required for the general public to understand the consequences of the issue if it's not solved and what issues it may bring up in future generations. It is also hoped that through public exposure, more donations and further aid can be brought towards the children who are involved in child labor in India. It is also hoped that more laws can be brought in to ban and criminalize child labor in India, and that future generations will not be affected by child labor in general in the future.
Here are our references. Thank you.